Okay, let's give this a crack. Today I'm doing a couple things to hopefully maybe increase the production value of my YouTube videos by having some music playing in the background. Well, what's playing in the background? Well, actually, it's a playlist of cuts that I wrote and produced for my fourth film called Out of Time, which is kind of a paranormal thriller. So I thought, hey, we'll put some music from Out of Time in the background. And today I want to talk about taking a bit of a turn away from anime for a day to do a little bit of portraiture, because I had mentioned, I think it was 2 days ago, I had mentioned this artist, Katya Gudkina, who I thought really is a very talented young lady. And I really liked what she was doing with these videos that she calls movie frame studies. So what she's doing essentially, she's taking a movie that, like a Ridley Scott film or something, that's got really nice cinematography and lighting and staging and composition, and then she's doing a grayscale study, to deconstruct the scene and I think essentially train and improve her composition and or use of value skills. So anyway, I thought that was kind of inspiring. So I decided to do some portraiture using a technique I just call it chiseling. It's the idea is that, let me grab a brush here that's going to be maybe along the lines. I think the calligraphy brush would be a good one. But when I say chiseling, what I mean is, I'm talking about just blocking in areas of value, and I'm hitting the R key in my paint here just to sample the color. Blocking in value and then coming back and chiseling back out of it to sort of shape it to where you want it to be. And the idea here is really training your eye, because when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, what you're looking at really is these shapes, like this. You're looking at the geometric shapes in the subject, and if you're doing it well, which I am not going to claim I do it that well, but what happens is you hopefully are able to simply and accurately report what you see, both in terms of shape and in terms of value. And of course, if you make a mistake, you just try again. Chisel a little piece back out of it, paint a little piece back in. And it is axiomatic that if the individual geometric shapes, it's like paint by numbers, if those shapes are correct, then the likeness of the portrait you're painting or whatever it is you're working on it'll just show up. It comes out of it. Now, in terms of sort of life lessons for creative people, which is probably what I'm going to categorize this video as, it's a really, really powerful concept to think in terms of what I call working from the known to the unknown. And when you do that, for something like this, you're going to start with really broad splashes of color, and normally, if you have a reference, which you probably should have, you're going to squint so that you don't see the details. You just want to capture the basic shapes. So if I was going to draw one of my anime characters, for example, I might go something like this. And it's kind of like, have you ever noticed if you're in the shower and you have tiles on the wall, you look up at the wall and you go, oh geez, I'm seeing all kinds of little cartoon characters in the tiles, that sort of thing. So this is the essence of Impressionism. The idea that goes hand in hand with this idea of working from the known to the unknown is that, and now I'm just going to make the brush a little bit smaller, is that um, when the part that's known is expressed correctly or accurately or reasonably well, what happens is that your brain and your imagination begins to fill in what's not there. Okay? So, and again, this is something I'm learning and practicing. Okay? And so anyway, with that in mind, this has applications in all the creative endeavors that I am involved with. With painting, it's like starting with those really broad splashes of color and then adding detail. And the key is that every step you take either moves you closer to your final destination or the likeness or your whatever you're trying to create, or it moves you away. It makes it a little better or a little worse. And basically what you're trying to do is develop the craft of noticing. Okay, as you're going along, noticing, is this making it a little bit better or is it making it a little bit worse? And then if it makes it a little bit worse, you just quickly retreat and try something else. So we're trying to eliminate completely from our life the idea of, am I good? Well, that pretty well sums it up. Self-criticism, which it really isn't beneficial. I mean, the fact is you just took a step and it either looks more like what you wanted or it looks less like what you wanted. So then you just try something else. Okay? So here as I'm adding specular, I'm saying this kid is backlit. Okay, so add a little bit of, and I feel like, yes, that's actually moving me slightly closer to an overall look that I'm happy with. But that last speck, I didn't like. So, okay, yeah, not too bad. And okay, I would say when I did these portraits, this was probably the most successful. This is Ryan O'Neal, and that's a still frame from a movie called Paper Moon, which was way back in the early 70s. And then this one, I would say, this is Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. This one, I would say, is a failure. It doesn't look like Indiana Jones or Harrison Ford. So now let me go ahead and turn this on, which, if I am not mistaken, should go ahead and play back at 4 times speed. So what I'm doing here is I am simply doing a speed paint. So I'm going back to when I was working on this. When I was working on this painting, and let's just look at how it unfolds. Because it is interesting. There's moments where it was getting closer and really starting to look like Harrison Ford, and then moments where it most definitely did not. And I'm looking all around like this because I actually have the media player on this screen, but I have OBS on this screen and I can see it actually in 3 windows. So I'm squinting as I look at this too, and really what the skill that I'm trying to develop is the ability to just paint what I see, if you will, to really see those geometric shapes that are in there. Now, how does this have application to music? Well, if you're composing music like this music that you hear in the background, moving from the known to the unknown usually means anybody can identify a melody. Okay, just a simple one voice linear melody. Okay, now if you're going to take that melody and harmonize it, then you're going to, in the most simple way, you would perhaps like a hymn, you might have a chord for every note of the melody. So if it's a simple, you know, da da na 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 na, you might put one chord on each of those. But if you want to introduce some ambiguity into the music, then don't do chords, just do a bass line. So now you've got a melody, which is one voice, and a bass line underneath it, which is a second voice. And because the third voice is missing, there's some ambiguity, there's some uncertainty as to what the actual chord choice is. And if you use altered bass notes instead of like always using the tonic or whatever, then it's even more ambiguous. And you can see here the Harrison. I really, you know, getting the eyes right is tough. It's really tough. I don't think I'm great at it at all, and it's something I definitely need to practice. But the cool thing is, it doesn't take that long. I mean, all 4 of these portraits in total probably took, you know, a couple hours. You know, so I'm moving fast, but I'm also deliberately trying to cultivate the habit of moving fast. I want to get to the mistakes as fast as possible. And the key thing again is to notice what I just drew, what I just added. Does it look more or does it look less? Or does it sound more or sound less like what I have in mind? Now that calls into question this very important question. Do you know what you want? And that's where you know you need to trust your own aesthetic sense, because I really believe this, that the very fact that you are you means that you are going to have a unique voice. And if you develop your artistry and if you develop your skill, you will contribute something to the world, because there's no one else like you. I know I sound like Mr. Rogers, but it's true. There's no one else quite like you or me. And so we all have something positive to contribute. And so anyway, getting back to other disciplines, I've written, I don't know how many screenplays I've written, but maybe, well, let's see, I got 8 movies plus a couple commissioned screenplays plus one movie that didn't get produced. So I've got at least 11. So let's say a dozen. Let's say I've written a dozen screenplays. Okay. Well, if you start with just a simple beat list, you know, the question as a writer of screenplays. So now in the painting here, it's getting closer. It ultimately doesn't get there, but it's getting closer. One of the things I did not do, which I could have done to make this job easier, is zoom in, do a lot of zooming in on both the painting and especially on the reference photo, so that I can see the geometric shapes. Because look, you can't reproduce a shape if you can't see it. And the reference image was kind of tiny, so that makes it a little more difficult to be real specific. So, not making excuses, I'm just saying that's reality. And that, again, is something that I'm noticing. I'm noticing, okay, the next time I try to do Harrison Ford, I'm going to make sure the picture is larger, I have the ability to zoom in and get a better look at some of the details so that I can reproduce them accurately. And then what you're really looking for is, does my mouse show up here? Yes, it does. What you're really looking for is relationships. Like, what's the distance, from the brim of the hat to the bottom of the shadow here, for example. How far is that? And when a portrait breaks or falls apart or doesn't work, it's basically because you've measured something wrong. I mean, it's always you've measured something wrong. If you screw up the value relationships, whoop-de-doo, it's going to be a little more contrasty than the original or less. Right there, and this is again what I say about Impressionism. The truth is, right there, before I finish the eyes, if I would stop there, probably anyone would look at it and say that's Indiana Jones. That's Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. But once I add the eyes in, because they're really not measured right and the details aren't rendered correctly, the portrait gets broken. So at this stage in the process, it was actually getting pretty close. And again, like I said, I never quite got it. So again, this has an analog in music composition of kind of the old school approach of a simple melody with a chord chart. Gives you everything you need to develop a full orchestration. Um, Again, in writing, work from the known to the unknown. So if you have a beat list, it's like, and a lot of writers start this way. They say, well, I know I want this scene, I want this real action sequence, or, they usually have a set piece, is what they often call it, in their mind that they definitely want in the movie. Well, that's fine. Include the set piece. Write what you know you're going to want. And then if there's some uncertainty, step back and make some decisions. There are no right answers, so just try something. And then, of course, you have permission to change your mind, right? So this has another analog in programming, because coding is a very creative process. And the metaphor would be pseudocode. Just write down in English what you want the program to do. Don't worry about how to code it. Just what do you want it to do? What do you want the user experience to actually be? Because right now we see a lot of trends toward, especially in website development and website improvement, we see trends towards certain design motifs that have become popular, and they are good, and they certainly were. Like, if you Google Bootstrap, you'll know what I'm talking about. But what happens is a lot of times people are so busy focused on achieving the current flavor of the week style that they forget the message, or they forget what they were trying to accomplish in the first place. Pseudocode takes care of that, because you're thinking in terms of what we know. What we know is, here's what we want the user to actually experience when they go there. So you write it in English, and then you go ahead and develop that out into actual algorithms and whatnot. So we're getting to the end of the video here, actually. So again, I will say I consider this one a failure. Let me go ahead and turn this off. And now we're back to Open Tunes. So I'm going to actually stop here and probably create a separate video of doing some inking, because that's where we're at this point. The anime is at the point where I'm going to say, it looks to me like about half of it has been inked. Probably not even half. So I need to go in and get these shots all inked up so that we can then do the paint and get this sequence into a finished state. So with that, I will leave y'all until next time.